I was part of the launch team that created content for their official apps. So in 2015, all the Kardashian and Jenner sisters launched their own individual apps. And they had content that was fashion related, beauty related, lifestyle. I mostly did Chloe's app. I wrote her sex column. I wrote her beauty column. It was really funny. It was really fun. It was definitely a learning experience for me. And I think looking back, that's part of what inspired me to get into the beauty industry. Well, for one, it was like a high stress environment and my skin kind of freaked out during the time I was working there. So I started independently researching a lot about skincare and beauty. And then working for these women, you sort of see how beauty standards are created and how they are consumed and how that is a very strategic thing in order to get clicks and sell products. And so I started deconstructing that in my head and applying it to different aspects of the beauty industry. And eventually I was like, you know what? This is super messed up. I want to do something about it.
Well, that's kind of what made me stop with that name in particular, because I feel like they've really shaped, I guess, again, I'm not sort of someone who's super across all the trends with face things, but how people have like the skin that's really shiny and the implants and all the injections and all of these things these days. And it's like, I really see they were part of that first wave of celebrities that were really pushing that. And they're such an interesting family because they have sort of darker skin, but they're not black, and they're sort of in this really weird world. So yeah, what sort of has come from that for you? You're obviously... I love how you call it like Dewey diet culture. It's one of my favorite things. But yeah, like where have you landed after this sort of journey from the Kardashians to now?
From the Kardashians. Well, when I started, I truly did think that they were great examples of empowered businesswomen. I really thought like, wow, these people started out with not much talent to work with and they've created these huge empires, and how amazing is that? And that was definitely like an early part of my own feminist learning and understanding and journey. And now where I am is recognizing that those things aren't necessarily empowerment, because that sort of empowerment within a patriarchal culture, what kind of power is that truly? I'm less interested in those forms of power, in beauty as capital, in infiltrating the male business world as capital, and I'm more interested in chasing collective liberation, which I think looks very different.
So where does beauty even sit in that? Because I think it's such an interesting, my partner and I talk about this as well, like we're both white, fairly attractive people who run a Taoist tonic herb company. And I have to think if I was Chinese, I probably wouldn't be as successful as I am, just because of the way our culture reflects back that sort of stereotype. And it's something I sit with a lot and I don't have any answers about yet. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting time because beauty does give us leverage and it does give us space in the world to take up.
I think an interesting path to go down if you are interested in learning more about that and learning more about beauty and how these standards evolved is just getting into the history of beauty standards. And when you do dive into the history, I wrote a pretty long article on that for Teen Vogue, if anybody wants to Google it, about the origins of beauty standards. But basically, beauty standards all came about through 4 particular forces in society: patriarchy, white supremacy, colonialism, and capitalism. Any beauty standard from the beginning of time can be traced back to one of those things. Beauty standards are how things like racism, colorism, sexism, and ageism are enforced. These aren't just fun things, even though we tend to think of them that way now. These standards emerged to support these sort of more nefarious societal forces and to, not to get too conspiracy theorist about it, but to convince us to reinforce these social structures. So when we are participating in beauty standards a lot of the time, we are reinforcing the very societal structures that oppress us, and we don't even know it.
I think that's such an important, mic drop moment, because we are all co-creating and participating in the ongoing perpetuation of these forms without any awareness around how we're actually contributing to that. And that's what I've loved about your work. You're really trying to bring that to the fore. And for me, it's been a big sort of, I think that's been happening in my life for a while, but then your work has really helped me give words, I guess, to sort of some of the stuff that's been brewing in my thinking, because I did some modelling when I was younger and it was quite toxic for me. Like I know some people don't have that experience, but I had an eating disorder. I felt like people were constantly looking at me and judging me, and just it really turned this kind of cog in me that made me very self-aware and very uncomfortable. And I've noticed myself over the last probably 20 years, just like I don't buy stuff anymore. I barely use anything on my skin. My skin seems to be about the same as when I used all the things, you know. It's just like this really funny kind of, as I decondition myself, it's like my life becomes a lot simpler. And
what strikes me there is that we often hear in the mainstream media beauty sort of touted as this path to empowerment. And beauty is empowering and beauty builds confidence. And sometimes those things can be true, but more often what beauty culture does is it disempowers us, because studies show that it contributes to things like anxiety, depression, body dysmorphia, eating disorders, self-harm, and even suicide. So it's really important to examine when we hear this beauty product is empowering or this thing is self-care, because the flip side of that is that this disproportionate focus on our physical bodies actually leads to all of those things that I just mentioned. So we sort of have to weigh that and say, okay, is the confidence that I get from getting this injection of Botox worth the anxiety that I get from now constantly worrying about my wrinkles for the rest of my life?